Absolutely delighted to join you. We're down at Bournemouth University on the South Coast, and I'm Debbie Holley, and I'm the Professor in Learning Innovation in our Health faculty. And Jacob is our wonderful learning technologist. And today we're planning to take you on a journey, and we're going to move backwards and forwards in time. And we're hoping that you're going to co-create a Student 4.0 future with us. We're also going to be inviting you to help our students navigate through the complexities of study as they build their careers. And as we're about to just talk a little bit about the structure of our talk, and in a minute, we're just going to invite you to add into chat, if you could time travel to any era of education, what would it be? So that's what's just coming up. And that's us. And this is us setting the scene. So we'll just talk a little bit around that. And Jacob, if you wanted to do the first couple, and then I can pick up from Brave
Absolutely.
New World.
Yes, we are quite excited to have you guys here. And we are excited to share some insight and provoke thought and delve into the journey of education, in particular, the topics we present in our presentation here. So touching on evolving education landscapes, we witnessed a significant shift from traditional classroom settings characterized by chalkboards and rows of desks to more digital and flexible learning environments. These advancements have enabled personalized learning experiences and brought a wealth of information to our fingertips. But what does that actually mean for our traditional educational values and methods? We had the COVID-19 pandemic, accelerating the adoption of online and hybrid learning models. Overnight, educators and students worldwide had to adapt new modes of delivery, testing the resilience of our educational systems, almost like an unplanned experiment.
Absolutely. So it was quite a brave new world for all of us. And then because of that, I'm kind of going to be playing a little bit with Huxley's Brave New World shortly. So in the chat, if you could travel to any era of education, which one would you choose? So you can just do it by decade or by century if you want. Where would you go?
You can even go in the future if you like. That's also valid. If there's an imaginary future era.
Because I'm running the slides, Jacob, if you'd be kind enough to tell me when to move on or to just sort of summarize what's in chat for me, that would be amazing.
Do we have
I can see we've got 5 already. So where are people wanting to go?
Into the future, 2045, 2100. So no one wants to go back, which is kind of surprising. But I'm the only one wanting to go to the 90s.
Okay, so we're going to be thinking about traveling in our classroom time machine. So we were thinking of doing all the Doctor Who music, but we thought we'd maybe give that a rest, as it's meant to be a very formal occasion. But if you just have a little think about, and we go into our classroom our classroom time machine, what would we actually find there? So here we've got some different kinds of classrooms. You can see that first of all, we've got a 1990s classroom with some very old IT in there. For number 2, I guess that's where all of you are wanting to go apart from Jacob. And we've got all our VR headsets on, we've got our HoloLenses up. The one thing I would say is they're still all sitting facing forward, aren't they? And then we've got more of a Victorian one, with a very traditional classroom there. So what would happen if we just start to get into our TARDIS and then we actually travel back and we arrive? So I don't know if you can have a look at the sort of grained out black and white, very early photograph in the bottom of the screen. Would anyone like to hazard a guess where that is? Or what it is? Because there's only a few of us, you can just unmute and shout out. That's fine as well, but you can put it in the chat as well.
Operating theatre.
You're right. Well done. Do you know which one it is?
No idea.
Yeah, it's St Thomas's. It's in London and it's a traditional operating theatre and you can still go and visit it. But this is one of the first photographs from 1862. And I just was fascinated because all the students funnel in. You've got the class at the front, and I guess you have the artifact of interest on the table in the middle, and it's where they did, you know, the sort of the very original dissections and things like that. And then if you have a look very closely at the one straight above it, it's a 1920s classroom. What do you notice about the education that's going on there from the photograph? It's
someone is typing segregation by gender. But
it is, yes. The boys and girls are sitting separately. The girls have all got very short hair. I don't know if anybody's health-based here. Do you know why they've all got short hair?
Was that knits?
It was knits. Well done, Peter. So from that, you can tell it's a working class school because the girls all had to have their hair short because of the knits. But they're all sitting facing forward and they're all got their fingers on the same page, the same place. And they're all learning at the same time. And that's really just sort of the starting point, sort of for hopping off to our very modern sort of classroom. So if we think about what's changed, this very traditional one, my original primary school was in that kind of a building. We had outside toilets. We had two playgrounds, one for girls and one for boys, with a big iron sort of railing between the two. And the desk I sat at age 4 3/4, it still had the old inkwell for dipping pens in. So this old classroom setting, it makes assumptions about how learning's taking place. You know, the teacher knows best, everyone's facing forward. Children should only listen and respond to the teacher, not respond to the person next to you. Uniform and consistency are good. And you can see some of the boys have got like a naval uniform on, you know, with the pipes round. Mm. And the learning's one directional. And I do wonder how much real learning took place in classrooms like that. You know, maybe the real learning took place somewhere else, in the playground and in the street, where the children would invent and play their own games. They'd choose games according to their interests and with rules that they agree to each other. So I was interested because Jacob's joined us quite recently. Tell us a little bit about your primary school, Jakob.
Yes, so you can probably tell from my accent that I'm German, and I grew up in an Eastern German school called Yuri Gagarin, and it's named after the first Russian astronaut visiting space. And we also actually had to write in ink, and the architecture of the building was quite brutalist. It was quite an outdated type of school settings in the 90s, and we had still a very Eastern German mentality in the classrooms of recitating poems and songs in front of the whole class and getting graded according to that. So there was definitely a different take on pedagogy and just layout and structure. Yeah. And then coming to Norway, because we migrated in 2000, we migrated to Norway. Suddenly, all the classrooms were more American. So we had lockers, we had small desks, smaller classrooms. We had proms. We had a lot of Americanism in the classrooms. So, what a culture shock that was.
And then if I just reflect on our very large lecture theatres, you know, whether we've got chalk and talk at the front or our PowerPoint, are we still maybe making some of the same assumptions about how people are going to learn? And what would Paulo Freire say about it all? So I'm going to be just slightly mischievous now. If we have a look at the new versus old. So just have a little think as we go on to the next bit about what fundamental aspects do you think have remained that are useful? So we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the ideas, but are any of the things that we've got there actually still useful? So we'll pick up in that in just a second. So if we have a look at new versus old, you've got the physical layout, students around the side, limited student interaction, a very teacher-centric approach. So those are some of the things that I think are probably very, very similar, and perhaps the power relationship quite similar. So I don't know if some of us listened to the budget last week and were thinking about higher education today. And I think I'm being slightly mischievous, but in England, we have a Chancellor for the Exchequer who didn't even mention higher education in the budget. And I was just very taken. The Institute for Fiscal Studies said, because nothing's happened with our fees in universities, it's going to take us back to the same as its low point in 2011, 3% lower than 1990. And the implication of this is 1 in 3 students are going to be staying at home because they can't afford to come to university and live away. So just being slightly mischievous, if we start to have a look at Brave New World, I don't know if any of you have actually read the book, but it's fabulous. It's looking at the dehumanizing effects of technology, and it implies that pain is necessary for life to have meaning. So I'm using this as an analogy of the new university, where the Office for Students are the new world state. So that's our analogy for this afternoon. And the story begins with 3 chapters describing this futuristic society. And I'm wondering, because all of you, I think, said you wanted to go forward in education, marriage, family, and procreation have been eliminated, and babies are now genetically engineered and grown in bottles. So I'm thinking this could be the sort of the parallels to the ref, the TEF, and now the KEF, with our baby academics being modified to meet the metrics. And citizens are programmed to be productive and complacent through a combination of biological manipulation, psychological conditioning, and a drug called soma. And I've made that as an analogy to our academic appraisals, metrics, and factory management structures in some of our universities, which obviously will not be named. And a new society named for Henry Ford was formed to improve the human experience. So the world state brainwashes its citizens to remain obedient. And so I'm just saying, you know, in the post-COVID university where we deploy technology, it can be used as a surveillance tool for both staff and students. And I think perhaps one of the things, or one of the questions about today, is what do we want our measuring to actually do? So I know I've been a little bit mischievous there looking at the Office for Students and metrics and things. And I do think here at the Active Learning Network, you're well on the way to articulating an alternative set of guiding principles, rather than looking at this as a narrative, because it's a politically constructed narrative, isn't it? We, Jacob and I, like you, we think students should be firmly placed at the centre of our educational endeavours. And so what we're going to invite you to do, once we've found out from you what should we be keeping and what should be going, we're going to look into a brave new world and explore the worlds of 2 students. But just before I do that, either in the chat, or if you're happy just to take your mic off, what do you think we should be keeping from sort of the 1870s, the 1920s, 1990s, our big lecture theatres? I'll just give you a moment to put something in chat. Jacob, I can see you smiling. What's being said? What's being said?
I was going to make a joke about how music was much better than in the past. So people are writing smaller groups, discipline in learning at early stages, education as a right, not a privilege.
Nice.
And that's about the responses we have. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. So the world state emerges as this antagonist, a sinister force that prevents the characters from having meaningful happiness of free will. So what we're going to do this afternoon is we're going to look at how we and our students, Shahida and Kevin, fare in this new world order. So we've moved from looking back now to kind of jumping forward. So who have we got here? Jacob.
So these are two imaginary students, and we're going to use them throughout our presentation now to set the scene, okay? So if you take Shahida, Debbie, I take Kevin.
Okay, that's fine. So Shahida is a 24-year-old medical student. She uses online resources and technologies, and she augment her learning experience. She wants to specialize in neurology or heart surgery. She goes off and does virtual simulations. She engages in global medical forums. She loves travel, and she embraces every opportunity to expand her global perspective and her medical knowledge. And then we have Kevin. Tell us about Kevin, Jacob.
And Shahida also comes from a stable background with not too much turbulence, and she has had a stable upbringing with never any shortcomings, I would say. Whereas Kevin, he rents his own place. He wants to quit vaping. He is an emerging art student, having his own website where he commissions and sells his work. He likes kind of hipster things, indie bands, sushi and ramen if he can afford it. But he's definitely not Shahida.
Absolutely. So we've got some contrasting students to consider. And we're just going to stop for a moment here just to have your thoughts, either in chat or on the camera. What factors can we already assume that are going to influence these students as they try to build their careers?
I would say financial freedom, maybe.
Financial, yes.
Time constraints, maybe, of that. Anyone else want to?
One that jumps to my mind is I've been getting sort of emails from the campaign for the arts. So it's about how society and the political system values different subjects, and I think where we're at the moment, I think Shahida is going to have an easier time in some ways pursuing a subject that is recognised as valuable, whereas perhaps Kevin might come up against some barriers in terms of societal and political support for the kind of study he wants to do.
That's a really good point.
Very good point.
And even though the government there's a BMJ article out saying that the government, they've promised to double medical places in England from 7,500 to 15,000 by 2031. And this year they've only done an extra 350, but there's a lot more grants and things like that and bursaries to enable medical students to take full access of their studies. So let's just... So Shahida loves to travel. We're just wondering, do you recognise the skylines? Anybody happy to have a guess at any of the skylines?
The first image, where are we in the first image? I just noticed there are actually two, 3 moons in that. There's actually 3 moons in that skyline there.
Is the first one Singapore?
Yes.
Yes, well done. The second one?
I only know that from watching Race the World.
Well, we've had a little experiment today, haven't we, Jacob? Because they're all ChatGPT created images that we've been using.
So they're not, they're more visualization of the highlights of that city, just compressed into one shot. So they're not authentic.
And the middle one? Where's the middle one?
Someone mentioned Sydney.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. We teach that. I teach project management. That was actually extremely over budget and over schedule. It was a result of a competition, a design competition. Wow. But then it went completely wrong, and it went millions of pounds over budget. It's well known for poor project management. For all sorts of reasons.
We love to have an exemplary project. Thank you, Paul. That's great. And then I guess most people have got the final one as New York. So she wants to go off traveling. So would you like to pick? Where would you like her to go? So she's going to go off and she's going to do an internship. Is anybody putting anything in chat, Jacob?
Just to clarify, does she need to go to one of those 3?
We can do all 3 if we've got time. So we can pick one and then we can see if we've got time to do the others.
So someone was typing Singapore?
Okay, so let's do Singapore then. So here we go. Here is Shahida in Singapore. So if you just have a little read.
Have you been to Singapore, Debbie?
I haven't, but funny enough, I'm going to Singapore next month, which is why I think I was probably quite keen to find out a bit more about it. I'll have to find out what this dining with the Marina Bay Sands is all about, won't I?
I have to say, Shahida's handwriting is meticulous. I'm not able to read to write that perfect.
But when we're looking here, we think it's very much about the second paragraph, engaging with the fellow medical students. She's building professional networks. It's thinking about connections. It's a step towards becoming globally minded and a healthcare professional. So there's kind of those aspirations there and long-term aspirations. I can't see the chat, but we will move on. But here we go. If we want, Sydney's stolen her heart. And cardiac care is profoundly patient-centered and innovative. And she's doing ward rounds, observing surgeries, and she's learning from the best in her field. So those are the kinds of things that we can kind of see where she's really building up her career there, and it's working so well, and she's working with very like-minded people. And then I'll just do the final one where she goes off to New York and she's had generous health funding. There's a lot of health funding to go over and to do exchanges and placements in New York, more than the other two. So let's move on. So Kevin can afford a day return from Bournemouth to London. Where's Kevin going to go? Would you like him to go to the National Gallery, the British Museum, or the Tate Modern? Peter, your mic's off. Pick one.
I would send him to Bradford.
Well, that would be really good. We'd love him to go to Bradford, but very sadly, he can only afford a day return from Bournemouth. And there is, you know, and that's one of the things to start with, isn't it? Everything's London-centric.
Mm.
And you're absolutely right. There is phenomenal art in Bradford. Has anybody made a choice in chat yet, Jacob?
The first choice was Tate Modern.
Okay, let's go to Tate Modern then. Oh, hang on, we're at the National Gallery. Apologies, let me skip through.
It's the slide after the next one.
Here we go. I was just going to say the Van Gogh sunflowers aren't at the Tate Modern. And so it's a different kind of communication. It's a different kind of place, but at least he can get there and he can look and be there and experience something. And I also picked the Tate Modern because I used to work at an inner city university at London Met. And we did a huge project with our first year students, who a lot of whom were local, who stayed at home, first generation. And we got them as part of their business degree to go down to the Tate Modern. And as they were wandering around, the sort of things they were saying to us is, I didn't know if it was an artwork or a door on the wall. I didn't know if it was this or it was that. And it's really sort of thinking about those different pathways and access. And the students couldn't believe that that was on their doorstep, that they could walk there, that they could cycle there, but their families would never take them to museums because they didn't have that kind of cultural background. And when I was researching to do this and having a little look, if you want to go to Oxbridge and study art, they've got the criteria used to grade applicants' responses, observation and description of works under consideration, analysis, comparison of two works in the chosen pair and ideas suggested by juxtaposition. For the interview itself, colleges will continue to practice their own methods within the envelope of the standard form. Additional visual analysis carried out verbally or a written assessment may form part of that process. And there was a bit of a story about this because students were being asked, what did you see? What art exhibitions did you go and visit during your holidays? And Kevin would be working during his holidays. He might manage a one up and down to the Tate Modern, but to be able to go through with that amount of detail, you need to have the time to spend actually in the environment. So it's just very interesting thinking about journeys and pathways to career success, I think. So, so I thought we could maybe move on to have a little bit of a discussion, or did you want to see what he said from the other two? Oh, we do. Okay, let me go back then. I'll do these. So that was the Tate Modern, and then this is the British Museum. I wish I had more support back home for students in the arts. Balancing jobs and studies is no joke. I wish you could see what I saw. The Rosetta Stone, ancient sculptures. It's tough doing this solo. Because he hasn't got a group to go with. He doesn't know that you can go and join a group and have a tour. He doesn't know, if you're an aspiring student and you're interested in Rosetta Stone, you can get in touch with the museum. And, there's not that kind of cultural capital there. And I'll leave you to just have a little read. And we have got the right artwork in the right gallery now. So, these imaginary scenarios, what are they offering our students? So we can either do it in chat, or there's just a few of us, we could do it verbally.
Early on, you mentioned the idea of networks, and I think that's probably one of the key things.
Yeah.
A word which I don't think we ever mentioned to students 20, 30 years ago.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, absolutely. So I think networks is one thing where one has and one hasn't. And that's one of the things that's being afforded there by their discipline selection, I suppose.
I can say it's important if you're a young person, if you can see somebody doing something, then you can more likely envisage yourself doing something. But that's also two-sided, because it's got to be a positive representation, I guess, or role models are possible. People see and copy rather than maybe primary way of learning. Just, watch somebody do it and then copy it.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing with the Shahida one, which comes from some interviews that we did on a project a while ago. It was about being able to see experts in their field at work. Whereas, just going into the museum, Kevin's not able to see an expert in his field at work or an expert art critic at work, for example. So, yeah, it's just thinking a little bit about that. So, we were thinking a little bit about study abroad, and just putting up some of the examples there about media and art. I think you've already said they've lost funding. And perhaps if I go down the media one, Jacob, and you can read out the health funding, so when people are listening to the recording, they'll get the different voices. So
just to clarify, the left column is Kevin, and the other column is for Shahida.
So if I'll tell you what, let's do this. I'll read out Kevin, you read out Shahida, and then that will help for people who are following. So art, we've already said, lost additional funding in the 2021 round. First in family to go to university, working part-time, has never been on a study exchange. And with the Turing scheme, we're not quite sure. Will the students have to pay some fees? Will they have to pay some travel? Is absolutely everything included? So it's very uncertain. Shahida.
So we see in our column, health funding.
Yeah.
She's exchanged as a part of her private school, her curriculum. She has traveled extensively. She has established connections and made networks, and she has a lot of social capital.
So then if we start to think about internships, which could be part of building careers, if Kevin takes an internship in London for 3 months in the summer, concern over university fees, he could lose his part-time job, could do a daily commute from Bournemouth, but he would have to travel at peak times. But the thing he's losing, of course, is the soft cultural benefits of internships, because if people have met you and they know you and you're working with them in an art gallery or whatever, you're building those networks and you're more likely to have your name put forward. If we go over to Shahida.
So her internship is probably on the pathway already established in her curriculum. Her good social networks would be a support platform for good accommodation and ease of travel, ease of connections in multiple places geographically. That's all you wrote in that column, Debbie.
Yeah, but that's absolutely fine. So medical students are very international, and when they do these placements, they all stay with each other's families, which is really, really nice. And it helps you settle so much more quickly if you know the family you're going to be staying with. So it makes a huge, huge difference there. Right. So we were talking about Education 4.0, which is meant to be kind of this thinking a bit about, we've got this fourth industrial revolution. What's education going to be doing? If we imagine Shahida could actually attend a ward round at these leading teaching hospitals, she could be on the heart surgery ward, she could use eye tracking software, and she could use the HoloLens to see the patient through the lens of the expert. So that might be a way in which less well-heeled medical students could start to access and start to gain some of those experiences that are making the big difference to her. Kevin could attend all the shows and collections in his sphere as a hologram. We've already got ways in which that can be working. But when we start to sort of unpack, the barriers aren't technological, and it's not the students are lacking vision. And quite often as faculty, we're told we lack imagination. And time after time again, we're told, it's all our fault that the students aren't getting access to all of these things. I think perhaps it's more a social and a political agenda, perhaps, than a faculty one. And we would argue that genuine change is being hampered by this agenda of commodification, which David Noble so eloquently describes in his work on digital diploma mills. I've got the reference for that in the resources at the end. So when we start to think about how these things play out for students, we can look at levelling playing fields, but I don't think it's completely something that we can wave a magic wand for as faculty. And we can have a chat about that in just a moment. And we were going to try, I wasn't quite sure if we could do a poll for this, Jacob. I was wanting to scale, which one do you think's most important? And this is from an Ernst Young and a Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce report that came out in 2021. India are really having huge government-led thoughts about how to enable education and university 4.0. So we were going to have a little go, weren't we, at the polls, but I think somebody, here we are, I've got one here, polls.
So I think we have to do it by chat, just because.
Oh, okay, because it's rate 1 to 10. We could see. Let's try it.
All right, let's give it a go.
Let's give it a go. Rate 1 to 10. So, 1 to 10. Do you think removing the barriers? Has it come up on your screens? Oh, fabulous.
It's got rate 1 to 10 and a scale of 1 to 5.
Okay.
Is this your cunning trick?
You 1 to 10? I don't know. Maybe it's just, has it gone off the side of your screen or something?
You might have to scroll down.
Yeah. Scrolling.
Okay, so for the first one, we think it's a 5. Okie dokie. The second one, sharing world-class knowledge. The third one, enables seamless transition in, out and through workplaces, matched by flows in, through and out of higher education.
Debbie, I can't see the poll anymore.
No, it's disappeared for me.
Okay.
I think you maybe need to let us have a look at a separate poll for each of those questions.
Maybe you're right. Let me end the poll and find out what actually, if I share the results, what do you see?
A 5 and a 7. Those are the last 2 questions, aren't they?
Okay, a 5 and a 7, that would do, wouldn't it? So if we looked at a 5 for removing the barriers and the 7 for sharing world-class knowledge, what would you rate enable as? Let's just do 1 to 10. 1 not very important, 10 hugely important.
I'll give a 10. I'll put a 10.
Yay! A 5 is perfect. So that's not in a poll. So thank you for letting us have a little play with that, Janet and Beth, and encouraging us to have a go. So I think we could certainly do something far more polished on another occasion. These are the 3 main things that have been identified in this huge Indian study, and quite a lot of it is replicated in an EU study that they're doing with the universities of the future that the EU are working on. So those are the 3 main things, but the focus to enable the first 2 to happen is the enable. And it's really thinking about how the workplace and the graduate moving in and out of higher education starts to make such a big difference. And I think one of the things that Jacob and I were thinking about is with this lifelong learning funding coming on stream next year, is this perhaps a new opportunity now where we can start to look at genuine lifelong learning and CPD for students, graduates? And I was just wondering if any of your universities had any thoughts on that so far.
I'm not really part of those conversations. I think UE has had some people have been looking at that. I mean, personally, I think that's hugely important that we're no longer at a stage where you can learn everything that you need to up to the age of 18, and then you're fine. Yeah. And even when I was sort of at university age, being able to take some time out and reassess and go back to university later on, it was constrained by when you could get the funding. So having more flexible funding for it, I'd say was really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what they're really looking for. So my next question to you is, when do you think 4.0 is going to become a reality? So when we were talking about the education of the future, and, right at the start, we go back to where we were right at the start, and you were all moving yourselves forward. Do you think the dates that you put in right at the start in chat are the actual dates for the barriers to scaling technology have gone? We're sharing world-class knowledge. It's not behind paywalls.
I would love the thought that it was going to arrive ever, but I'm not sure when. I mean, it's quite interesting because, with, say, for instance, the example of AI, number of AIs have been released and we've been kind of exposed to what they can do, but now they're starting to go behind paywalls. So one of the things that, we've discussed in other sessions is the issues around the digital divide.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and that underpins some of this session as well, doesn't it? It hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting wider, I would say. The divide is getting wider.
Paul, what do you think?
And universities don't know how to afford it either. That's the other. Because we've been doing a roadshow on generative AI really for about a year now. And we've yet to find a university that really has worked out what it will cost and how they will afford it.
Interesting.
I don't know. I was just thinking of the e-learning. Remember when e-learning became a thing? And I think MIT promoted all its lectures online. These are the MIT.
Yeah.
That's right.
And there were these things, weren't there? Wasn't there like these sites where people could put their lectures on the website and people could put a course together? But did that ever really take off, or did it ever really have an impact eventually? I don't know.
Well, it's the MOOC, wasn't it? The MOOC.
That's right. And the government wrote a white paper on MOOCs and how it was going to transform the world. And we all thought, oh my goodness.
And 2012 was the year of the MOOC. Must have missed that one.
And here we are a decade later. So the only thing I can say is I can only be thinking about perhaps some of the underpinning barriers and scaling. And there's a report, The State of XR and Immersive Learning. It was a big Delphi study that I worked on that came out in 2021. And we started to look at, was it long-term, short-term, medium-term? And we've just redone all the voting. So this June, it's going to be launched. And so we might actually be able to answer some of those questions about, will it become a reality and when? And will they carry on blaming faculty for all of it? So I can see we're just about kind of coming up towards the end. We wanted to finish. So reflections on our journey through the decades today. So we've gone back and forward. And this is very simple A and B one. I don't know if we can risk a poll, or probably not. We can just shout A, B, or put it in the chat. Do we think we're going to have a dystopian futuristic world state with our citizens, students being environmentally engineered into an intelligence-based social hierarchy? Or perhaps, will we draw upon technologies to enrich the student learning experience, focusing on employability and providing opportunities for research excellence? So I was going to just finish today and just to conclude with, do we think it's going to be an A or a B? Or maybe an either?
I want to be controversial and say something different.
Yeah, go, please.
Yes.
Please be controversial. Say something different.
Would you like people to put that in the chat or just discuss?
Why don't we just, there's four of us, why don't we just go around and do that as concluding comments? Then we can turn off the recordings, we can have a little bit of a chat, I'll stop sharing, and we can go and enjoy our Friday evenings. Janet, what do you think?
It depends how optimistic I am. I would love it to be B, but I think it's likely to be a C, where things become more and more unequal and inequality becomes more entrenched because of the advantages leveraged by access to technology. And I mean, Kevin may not have very much data on his phone, so he may be excluded from a lot of things. So that's kind of where I'm sitting.
Beth?
My controversial take is I'm starting to think that it's what I would like to see in terms of the future. It's obviously not the dystopian future, but I don't think it's all about technology either. And I think, I went to one of the sessions on AI earlier in the week, and someone made the point that there are actually huge environmental costs to that. And it may be that we actually have to scale back or do something different with technology, that we can't just keep on using new technologies and resources in that way. we maybe need to, in some places, go back to basics a little. And it's not about the technology; it's about the what is education for, and how are we preparing students for that future. And a lot of that's going to be about the more human element.
Good, excellent. Peter.
I would hope to go for B, but I would have to say that I don't agree with the focus on employability, because we've got to rethink that. Because to my mind, the notion of the career, as was practiced on me, so to speak, is no longer valid, because things are changing so fast that both your two student examples need to really think about what skills they're going to develop, because they will have to change several times throughout their career based on the way things seem to be going. So there's a kind of flexibility that employability sometimes doesn't capture.
I guess if you're going to use digital tools, you've got to have a learning strategy primarily. Then the digital tools can support that. I think people in industry say along the lines of, say for example, designers. You got people who are really good at CAD systems, but they can't design yet because they're not experienced enough. But I think it does make life a whole lot more interesting, these digital tools. It's got to have an impact on motivation and engagement, and and people love digital, love that sort of thing, and if they can hitchhike onto learning with that, that's all the better, isn't it? There's great potential, isn't there? There's and if you're more connected, it does make you think it makes things more competitive as well, because your next door neighbour could be doing something so innovative and different, could leave you standing. Like I've just been to Sydney virtually and witnessed this learning event, and now I know all this. I think, well, I just read a book for 2 hours. I don't know. It seems to broaden out a lot of possibilities. It's intriguing, isn't it? But I don't know. I don't know what what the studies will say eventually. It's got to be a good thing, though, hasn't it? It's got to be a positive thing. Although the extent to the damage to our society of politicians who don't tell the truth and utilize social media to get across a false message. That's just my subjective opinion. It is really quite alarming. But I don't know whether if we go down that road as well. I think it's going to be positive, though, learning.
Well, I don't know. I think you have to go a long way to be to pencil, paper in a library, don't you?
Yeah. I prefer a book and book and a notepad. And
so maybe it's getting the right mix. So one of the things we just thought about, if you're interested, and I don't know if the organisers are doing this, but we'd be very happy to write something up if any of you wanted to put a paragraph together. And we thought we might do something on the blog for the Active Learning Network. So our email addresses are there, and if you'd like to, we'd be very, very happy to co-author something and to have something as a collaboration and an output. And a huge thank you for coming on a Friday afternoon. You are absolute stars.